Solving quadratic equations using the quadratic formula method, part 3. And in this video, I just have one more example that I would like to show you, and that is example 4. 2/5 x minus 3/10 x squared is equal to 7/10. Now, my first step here says that I technically want to put this in standard form. But I'm actually going to do something before that. What we see in this problem is fractions, and what most students do not like is fractions. So I can only imagine what's going to happen here is if we try and put all of these fractions into that lengthy formula. It would become very chaotic very fast. So let's try and get rid of these fractions. And I'm going to do that using that magic trick that you've seen me do a couple of times before. I'm going to look at my least common denominator between all fractions, and then if I multiply it in the numerator, it should cancel out, which makes all my denominators disappear. That's why I call it magic. So looking at my denominators of 5, 10, and 10, that gives me an LCD of 10. So I am going to multiply both sides of my equation by 10, or 10 over 1. And I can do this because it is an equation, and I balance my equation out by doing it on both sides. Let me do it on the right-hand side first because it's easier to see. Here I have 10 divided by 10, which reduces to just 7 over 1, or 7. On the left-hand side, I have to distribute this 10 through. So let me focus it when I distribute it through this piece. Again, I have 10 divided by 10, which cancels out. So that just leaves me with the numerator of a negative 3x squared. Now, let me think of it as I distribute it through this piece. Here I have 10 divided by 5, which reduces to 2. So I have 2 times 2, which gives me a 4, and then my x term here. So that gives me a 4x. Voila! It's magic. We no longer have any denominators. So now, this one should be fairly simple to use the quadratic formula method. So now I can set it into standard form. Again, I like my leading term, the one with the x squared positive. It makes it a little simpler later on. So I'm going to move both of these over to the right-hand side by subtracting 4x and adding 3x squared. So that gives me a 0 on the left, putting my right in descending order, 3x squared minus 4x plus 7. So I can pick out my A term is 3, my B term is negative 4, and my C term is 7. My variable in this problem is x, so it's going to start out as x equals. I'm going to skip just writing down the formula here, but let's go through it as we see it over here. Singing it one more time for you. We have x equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay. So I just need to plug in those a, b, and c's to all those appropriate places. So I have x equals negative, my b value is a negative 4, plus or minus square root, my b is a negative 4 squared. Now I want you to notice that I always have put this in parentheses, and I recommend that you do the same. If you're one of those people that just leaves the parentheses off and types it into your calculator is going to read this as a negative 4 squared, which gives you a negative 16, which is not true because we want all of negative 4 squared, which is a positive 16. So if you put this in the calculator, you absolutely must put in those parentheses in there to give you the correct sign. Finishing my formula, I have minus 4 times my a value, which is 3, times my c value, which is 7. And this is all over 2 times my a value, which is 3. So simplifying a little bit here and there. On the left, I have a negative 4, which simplifies to give me a positive 4. Plus or minus square root. Again, that negative 4 squared gives me a positive 16. Minus 4 times 3 gives me 12. And 12 times 7 gives me an 84. This is all over 6. Again, do not simplify the 4 and the 6 yet. You must wait until the very end to do that. So I have x equals 4 plus or minus 16 minus 84 gives me the square root of negative 68. That's still all over 6. So now I need to do a good pi and a bad pi with my 68. So if I divide that by the largest square, which is just 4, and 4 times 17 does give me 68. The negative, we just learned in your last set of videos, the complex number or the imaginary number, square root of a negative is an I. So I can put that in my good pi. And that's all over 6. So simplifying that square root of negative 4 gives me a 2i root 17 all over 6. Now I can divide the 4 and the 6 because I can also divide the 2 and the 6. Remember, you must divide all of those at the same time. Now I like to split it up so it makes it more obvious. That's the way that we have to do it. So we have 4 over 6 plus or minus 2i root 17 over 6. 4 divided by 6, divide each of those by 2. 4 divided by 2 gives me 2. 6 divided by 2 gives me 3. 2 over 6, divide those by 2. 2 over 2 gives me 1. 6 divided by 2 gives me 3. So I have the answers of x equals 2/3 plus or minus I root 17 over 3. Or on the right, I can just rewrite it in a little bit different format. I can just put that I on the last. Because remember, we like to write these in the form of a plus bi. So my a is 2/3 and my b is root 17 over 3. And so then my I is the last. So this is my answer to this problem. Remember, it's a degree 2 equation. You should have 2 answers. And we do. One of them from the positive, 2/3 plus root 17 over 3i. And one of them from the negative, 2/3 minus root 17 over 3i. And we have solved this problem by using the quadratic formula. So let's review those methods one more time. Okay? Put it in standard form. Write down your formula. Plug in your a, b, and c values. And then simplify completely. I'd also like to review all different ways to solve quadratic equations. We can solve them by factoring method, and this works for any polynomial. Doesn't have to be degree 2. It doesn't have to be quadratic. That factors. We could use the square root method as long as there is no single x term. And we can use the quadratic formula, which will always work on any quadratic equations, meaning degree 2 equations. But I like to leave my quadratic formula as my last option because we can see that it can be very lengthy and it can take us a long time to do just a simple problem that we could have done much shorter and faster using the factoring or square root method. But if your problem doesn't factor and doesn't solve using the square root method, then you must use the quadratic formula method. So these are the 3 ways that we can solve quadratic equations.